The night I became a joke. I was wearing a suit I dry cleaned specifically for the occasion. That detail keeps coming back to me. The suit. I dropped it off on a Tuesday, paid extra for same-day service, and picked it up in a garment bag that crinkled every time I moved. I remember standing in front of my bathroom mirror that Saturday evening, adjusting my collar, thinking, this is going to be a good night. I remember feeling, for the first time in months, genuinely hopeful. I don't think I'll ever be that naive again. And I'm not sure whether that's a loss or a gift. Snail's stories. And this one took me a long time to tell. Her name was Renata. I want to be precise about that because the way I used to say her name, quickly, casually, like it meant nothing, is not how I said it for 8 months. For 8 months, I said it the way you say the name of a city you fell in love with on vacation. With weight. With a kind of private reverence. We met at a rooftop party in late spring. My friend Casper had dragged me there after I'd spent 3 consecutive weekends working, surviving entirely on coffee and the grim satisfaction of finishing a structural report no one would read except 2 project managers and a building inspector. I almost didn't go. I remember standing at the bottom of the stairs thinking, I could just go home. I was 29. I was tired. I had exactly 0 interest in making small talk with strangers. Then I looked up and saw her laughing at something, her head thrown back, one hand pressed flat against the railing to keep her balance. And something in my chest did that stupid thing hearts do when you're about to make a decision you'll spend a year thinking about. We talked for 3 hours that night. Just us, in the corner by the bar, while the party moved around us like water around 2 rocks. She was sharp. She had this way of listening that made you feel like whatever you were saying was the most interesting thing she'd heard all week. She asked follow-up questions. She remembered things you'd mentioned 10 minutes earlier and brought them back around. I'm an architect. I spend a lot of my professional life making things fit together elegantly, and talking to her felt like that, like something clicking into place. I asked for her number at midnight. She gave it to me immediately, which surprised me. I'd expected some kind of performance. Instead, she just typed it in and handed my phone back and said, "Don't wait too long to use it." I texted her the next morning. The first 3 months were easy in the way that first months always are. She had a high-pressure job in event coordination, which meant she was sometimes stressed, sometimes distracted, always moving. I found that attractive at first, the sense that I was one part of a full life, not the whole of it. We'd meet for dinner midweek when she had a free window. We'd spend Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, which I'd never done before and which she turned into a kind of ritual. We cooked together badly and ate it anyway and laughed about it. I was happy. I want to be clear about that. I was genuinely happy, and I had reasons to be. But here is the thing about certain kinds of unhappiness. It doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't knock on the door. It seeps in under it, and by the time you smell it, it's already in every room. The first comment I remember was at a dinner with her 2 closest friends, Mira and Dasha. We were talking about a film, some thriller I'd been halfway through before falling asleep on the couch, and I said something about the plot that was apparently wrong. Mira corrected me gently, and Renata laughed and said, "He does this. He pretends to watch things and then gives opinions on them. It's a whole thing." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. I said something self-deprecating about my terrible attention span. But driving home that night, I sat with a low, humming discomfort I couldn't name. She hadn't been wrong exactly, but the way she'd said it, "He does this, it's a whole thing," like I was a recurring problem. Like I was a bit, an act, something to explain to people. I told myself I was overthinking it. For 3 months, I told myself I was overthinking it. By September, the comments had a pattern. They were always in front of people. They were always small enough that pushing back felt disproportionate. Petty even, but specific enough that they landed somewhere soft. She'd mention casually, in front of her coworkers, that I was not great with social situations. She'd explain my job in a way that subtly undersold it. "He does buildings, not he's an architect." She'd laugh at my stories a half beat too late, the way you do when you're waiting to see if anyone else laughs first. When we were alone, she was mostly fine. That was the part that confused me. When we were alone, she was the woman from the rooftop. Curious, warm, capable of making me feel seen. So I kept explaining away the other version of her as stress, or tiredness, or the strange performance anxiety that sometimes grips people in social settings. I brought it up once. A Sunday afternoon in October, both of us on the couch with coffee going cold. I said something like, "I've noticed you sometimes say things in front of your friends that I don't totally love." Careful.
Non accusatori.
She looked at me like I just told her I believed in astrology. "You're very sensitive," she said, not cruelly, almost gently, the way you tell a child that the monster under the bed isn't real. "I'm just joking around. Everyone does that with their partners. It's affectionate." I dropped it. I believed her, or I chose to believe her, which is a different thing entirely, and I've thought about that distinction a lot since. Her 30th birthday was in November. She'd been planning it for 6 weeks. A reservation at this Italian place downtown with a 3-week wait list and pasta that cost $40 and came in portions that assumed you were decorating a plate, not eating a meal. She'd invited 20 people. Friends, co-workers, her cousin Lyosha and his wife, a few people from her old job. She asked me to arrive early, help her manage the arrivals, make a good impression. I took that seriously. I showed up at 6:30 in the dry clean suit. I brought her a gift I'd spent real time on. A first edition of a travel memoir she'd mentioned loving in passing 6 months ago. Something she probably didn't remember mentioning. I tracked it down through 3 different online sellers. I was proud of it. "You look nice," she said when I walked in. Her eyes were already moving past me. I spent the first hour by the bar, talking to Lyosha about apartment prices and interest rates, which is not a conversation I would have chosen, but is the conversation you have when you don't know many people and the people you do know are too busy circulating to include you. I wasn't miserable. I was patient. I kept telling myself, she's hosting. This is her night. Give her the night. Around 7:30, the appetizers came out and Renata clinked her glass. The room quieted. 20 faces turned toward her. She was luminous in the attention. I can't say it any other way. She was born for it. "I just want to say thank you all for being here," she started, and then her eyes landed on me, and she smiled. "And I want to introduce someone most of you haven't officially met. This is Dorian, my boyfriend." A few people smiled. Someone raised their glass. I nodded, feeling that particular awkwardness of being publicly displayed. And then she added, "Don't get too attached, though. He's a limited-time offer." The table erupted. Not politely, not with the gentle, uncertain laughter of people who aren't sure how to respond. Erupted. Her best friend Mira actually slapped the table. Someone in the back let out a whoop. Her cousin Lyosha, the same man I'd spent an hour discussing mortgage rates with, nearly choked on his wine. Renata was already turning away from me, her arms out, accepting the energy like a performer taking a bow. I stood there. My face went through several temperatures in about 4 seconds. Hot, then cold. Then something past cold, something closer to absence. Like the embarrassment had overloaded the circuit and the whole thing had just shut off. My hands, when I looked down at them, were perfectly still. I set my drink on the bar. I walked to the host station near the entrance. The hostess looked up, confused, and I asked her to split out my portion of the bill. She hesitated. I told her again quietly. She pulled up the tab. I handed her my card, signed the receipt without looking at the total, and walked out. The cold November air hit my face like a glass of water. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment. My breath fogged under the streetlight. A couple walked past, hand in hand, laughing about something I couldn't hear. I watched them and felt completely outside of time, like I was a photograph of a man standing on a sidewalk rather than an actual man standing on one. I walked 3 blocks to my car, sat in it for a minute without starting the engine. Through the windshield, I could see the warm light spilling from the restaurant windows. Then I drove home. By the time I unlocked my apartment door, I had 16 missed calls. I poured myself a whiskey, the good one, the bottle I'd been saving, and sat on my couch in the dark and watched my phone screen light up, over and over, like a small unreasonable sunrise. I read none of the messages. Around midnight, the tone shifted. One text read, "You embarrassed me in front of my entire family. I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned my phone off and went to bed. She came to my office Monday morning. I hadn't expected that. I'd blocked her number the night before, which I suppose forced the escalation. She brought her uncle, a large, quiet man named Valentin who owned a construction company and had very expensive taste in watches. I'd met him once at a summer barbecue and we talked about timber costs for 40 minutes. She looked terrible, honestly. No makeup, messy hair. Like she'd rehearsed this confrontation all night and was running on the adrenaline of arriving. "We need to talk," she said. "We don't," I said. "You made your position clear on Saturday." Valentin stepped forward with his hands up. "Look, son, I'm not your son," I said, still calm, surprisingly calm. "And no, we can't sit down somewhere." What followed was a conversation I had no interest in having but couldn't entirely avoid. She said it was a joke. I said jokes are supposed to be funny for everyone in the room. She said I was paranoid. I said she'd given me 8 months of reasons to be. She said I was embarrassing her. At some point, when she realized none of this was working, something shifted in her face. And she said, "Everyone was right about you. You're small. You're boring. You have no sense of humor." I was settling. I looked at her. And the strange thing, the thing I've thought about 100 times since, is that it didn't hurt the way she wanted it to. It just made me tired. Bone tired. The way you feel at the end of a very long day when you finally get to sit down. "Then it's a good thing you don't have to anymore," I said. I walked back to my office. I heard Valentin murmur something behind me. I heard the elevator open and close. I sat at my desk and stared at my screen for a full minute before I could work. Patricia, my receptionist, called a few minutes later. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. For what it's worth, she was completely out of line. "I know," I said. "If they come back, I'll call security." They didn't come back. The weeks after were quieter than I expected. Not empty, just quiet. I went for long runs where the cold air made my lungs burn and my thoughts finally went silent. I started sketching again in the evenings the way I used to in college, before I turned my creativity into something that had to be justified by a client and a budget. I slept through the night for the first time in what felt like months and woke up realizing I'd been braced, all that time, for something. For what, I wasn't sure. For the test I didn't know I was taking. A mutual friend, Petra, reached out. She said she'd thought what Renata said was messed up. She said a few of them had, and that they just hadn't known what to do in the moment. Then she said something that stung more than everything else combined. She wanted to be with you, but she also wanted everyone to know she could do better. We talked about it. It was uncomfortable to watch. I sat with that for a long time, not because it was new information, but because it named something I'd been feeling for 8 months and hadn't had words for, that particular, grinding experience of being someone's partner and someone's evidence at the same time. A few weeks later, I ran into her brother Merrick at a coffee shop. He came over, shifting his weight, clearly uncomfortable. He said he wasn't there to defend her. He said he'd told her that night in the parking lot that what she did was wrong. He said their uncle had been furious when he finally understood. Not the watered-down version Renata had given him, but the actual thing word for word. "He lit into her," Merrick said. "I've never seen him that angry. He doesn't get angry." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. "Anyway," he said, picking up his coffee, "I just wanted you to know. Most people, once they knew the full story, it wasn't what you'd call a popular move." He left. I sat there watching people pass the window. Couples, families, dogs on leashes. Life moving forward at its ordinary, unstoppable pace. I didn't feel vindicated. I want to be honest about that. I felt tired, and a little relieved, and mostly just ready to be done with the whole thing. I'm 30 now. I'm working on a project I'm genuinely proud of. A mixed-use building near the waterfront. Something that took real risk to propose and that got accepted anyway. I started sketching again. I sleep through the night. Small things, but they add up to something that feels like being returned to yourself. I don't think about Renata often, but when I do, I think about the suit. I think about how carefully I'd had it cleaned. I think about the vintage compass necklace I'd bought her, which I'd left on the counter when I paid my bill and never mentioned again. I think about standing on that sidewalk in the November cold, watching my breath fog under the streetlight, feeling like a photograph of a person. And I think she was right. It was temporary. She just didn't understand that temporary could be the kindest possible outcome. Some people never learn to own their mistakes. You cannot make them. All you can do is decide how long you're willing to pay the cost of waiting for them to try. I paid it for 8 months. Then I put on my coat, settled my bill, and walked out into the cold. Best decision I ever made with perfectly steady hands. Thanks for watching. If this story stayed with you, consider subscribing. There are more ahead.